For those who I have not met, my name is Michael Goldberg, and I'm the Executive Director of the Veale Institute for Entrepreneurship here at Case Western Reserve University. And I also am an associate professor in the business school at Case at our Weatherhead School of Management. And it's a pleasure to welcome a business school friend of mine. Actually, I was just talking recently, anybody that, I guess maybe because we were not in the same cohort at Wharton. I don't even know if we were in any of the same classes, but I didn't talk a lot back in the day at Wharton. I was mostly quietly observing.
Yeah.
So I'm an unlikely, the fact that I now teach at a business school, work at a university, people that I went to business school with find that quite amusing.
They're lucky to have you.
Well, thank you. Very nice. Of course, the career I really wanted, as indicated by my background, I do like to, pay homage to our speakers. And I guess I should have shown The Last Dance as my background because Jeff is a big Bulls fan. And I'm sure the ratings at ESPN for this event are quite good, but I was, as you may remember, the play-by-play announcer for Princeton basketball and football. But
I do remember that.
But my path did not take me. So perhaps one of the outcomes, if today goes well, maybe you'll introduce me to the guys.
How well do you know ping pong or South Korean baseball?
Well, I'm a huge Sin-Shu Chu fan, but that's about it. I did watch the other day. So South Korean baseball, that's how bad things have gotten. I did watch.
Because we might have some good opportunities for you on ESPN, okay, depending on your knowledge of those particular niche sports.
I will forward my resume on. But Jeff, thank you for doing this today. It's always great to reconnect with you. And as we do with these sessions, we have a student moderate. So Alex West, who's one of our great undergrad students, is going to moderate the session. And for those that are new to this, please, it's going to be very participatory. So let Alex know either by putting a message in the chat or raising your hand if you want to ask a question. And this should be a lot of fun. So Alex, over to you.
Thank you. So as Michael mentioned, I'm Alex West. I'm a fourth-year mechanical engineering major here at Case. And I want to thank everyone for joining in for the call, especially Mr. Jeff Stotland. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'll try and work them in when I can. So just to start, I was wondering, Jeff, if you could explain some of your career background. I know you worked at Disney before you went to business school, and then you ended up there again some number of years later. Could you just walk through your career journey?
Sure. So I went to Northwestern in nearby and to you guys. And unlike you, Alex, I was an engineer, but unlike you, I was a fake engineer. I got a degree in industrial engineering. After school, I moved to New York and worked as an analyst for JP Morgan in their M&A group, mostly focused on aerospace businesses. And I did that for a couple of years, and just sort of at that point decided I wanted to do something less service oriented. I wanted to work for get experience working for a company that made something. And an opportunity came along to work for Disney. And so I jumped at that. I wasn't, I didn't grow up going to Disney every year. Obviously there's tons of people who did that. But I did go, and I had some affinity for it, but I just kind of found it to be an interesting business. And I thought it was, I had a lot of respect for how they did things, and I thought there was a lot of good opportunities. So I went and did that, and then went back to business school, which is where Michael and I met. And then after school, I basically really just had a very strong desire to do something more entrepreneurial. So really I wound up kind of doing that, and started a company with another classmate of mine in business school. And we initially started looking at really boring sort of industrial businesses. It wasn't our thesis necessarily to do something boring. We were just trying to find something that was kind of an opportunity, because nobody really was looking at it too much. So we we started focusing on recycled auto parts, which is unsexy as you can get. We were focused on the Southeast, and we sort of looked at all these different junkyards all over the country and these small mom and pop businesses. It seemed really disorganized and kind of chaotic. And so our thought was, what if we wound up buying some of these smaller salvage yards and consolidating them, putting them together in the Southeast? And this was around, I guess, 99, so about 20 years ago, and a little over 20 years ago. And then so I say that because that was when the whole sort of dot-com boom was going on. And so we said, hey, we got some encouragement. We actually got to a letter of intent stage to buy this one salvage yard in Cary, North Carolina. We got fairly close. And then we started thinking about, instead of buying physical yards, what if we actually just created a network where we just took the inventory of all the different parts, and we created a way for people who buy parts, like collision repair shops, insurance companies, and consumers, direct to consumer, and then also all the suppliers, like all the salvage yards all over the country, basically. So we kind of pivoted and raised a bunch of money. We raised about $10 million, actually. At that time, it was a lot of money. We built a company called iSalvage. And it was this network, basically, of recycled auto parts. That lasted for about, I would say, 2.5 years. The dot-com market crashed. I can't say that was the reason why it didn't work out, but it didn't really work out that well. We had about 70 employees, I would say, at the peak. We were based in New York. Super fun, crazy time. The whole focus at that point was really on grow. Don't worry about how you're going to make money, but just sort of get scale. And I think, we just had a lot of pressure to sort of abandon some of the general business principles that you might otherwise kind of focus on in the interest of just kind of looking for growth. So we wound up selling this company, but we sold it at a loss. So I definitely wouldn't say it sort of worked out well. But it was a really interesting experience. And then one of my investors in that asked me what I was going to do next after that. And I didn't really want to start something, but I still wanted to do something entrepreneurial. So I focused on buying a company, and I didn't really know what I wanted to buy. So I searched around for a while, and I wound up buying a aviation business in Teterboro, New Jersey, and a small maintenance and repair business that basically repaired certain components that go on corporate jets. So there's two types of, to oversimplify, there's two markets for aviation. There's the general aviation market, which is like corporate jets, and then there's a commercial market, which is what everybody flies effectively. All the sort of the passenger airlines, cargo operators, stuff like that. So this business that I bought was a very small operation in New Jersey, and they basically provided maintenance on some of the safety and survival components that go on general aviation aircraft. So turboprops, single engine, sort of corporate flight department type stuff, and essentially. Disney, for example, would have 5 corporate jets. So they would have to get those airplanes maintained. This company actually would provide the maintenance services on certain components. There might be 5,000 components that go on an airplane. This company that I bought serviced safety and survival equipment. I liked it because I figured whether that plane had to fly or not, they had to service those. They had to get them certified. It was regulated by the FAA, and I felt like it was, I guess, coming off what I just did, it was lower risk in the sense that, like, it wasn't subject, I didn't feel like, to the whims of sort of the aviation market, because some of the stuff had to get serviced. Anyway, I wound up running that business for about 12 years. We grew it a fair bit, opened up a facility in Texas and Dallas, which is where we totally pivoted that company into commercial aviation, where, you have airlines that own 400 or 500 aircraft, as opposed to, what I would call whale hunting, where you're going out and trying to sign up large customers with bigger aircraft, as opposed to, 1,000 or 2,000 smaller corporate aviation businesses with 3 or 4 aircraft. So each customer was much harder to get in the commercial aviation business, but worth a whole lot more. And then ultimately sold that business in 2014. And then had another business that my partner and I bought. We actually initially started out with a loan. It was a sort of convertible debt loan to a manufacturer of kitchen countertops. So alternate surfaces, wood, copper, sort of not the traditional surfaces. This one was based in Atlanta. We found this through my partner's accountant, which is probably the worst way to find the deal ever, through an accountant. But we did, and they couldn't pay back the loan, so we wound up owning we converted all the equity, we wound up owning the company. And then I oversaw that. I hired a president to run that business. It was about 60 employees, and then had that for a number of years as well, and sold that in 2014 as well. Personally, so I was doing this for about 15 years, basically sort of this more acquisition, try to grow the business like you do the real estate, where you buy the real estate, try to fix it up, and then sell it at a higher price. That was essentially what I was doing. Moved for personal reasons. We moved out from New York to California, to Southern California. And at that point, I decided, I was kind of thinking of what I was going to do next. I was looking at maybe buying another business. And I had always sort of kept in touch with the folks at Disney, a couple people who had sort of stayed there for all those years. Various times they'd sort of asked me if I'd be interested in coming back. And, I kind of felt like I was unemployable at that time because I liked being on my own, even with all the ups and downs and the trials and tribulations, I guess, of doing something more entrepreneurial. But after my experience sort of doing what I did, I was just, and I had young kids, I felt like I didn't have it in me to do it again at that point in my life. And this was right around 2014. And so an opportunity came up for me to go back to Disney to run domestic strategy and planning for the parks division. And I decided to go do it. So that's kind of my journey. It was I guess I would say it was the opposite of what most people do. Most people start out in corporate America or something bigger and then decide that's just not for me. I want to have more control over my own destiny, more authority, more accountability, more flexibility, and they go into something more entrepreneurial. Apparently, I've done the opposite. So certainly this is not by design, but happy to sort of answer any questions about either side of my career. It's a little bit of I would say it's different in that sense.
Yeah, thank you for that. So to start, I think I wanted to ask about what exactly you're working on with Disney right now and how that's been affected by the pandemic.
So what my group is responsible for is there's two areas. One is we try to figure out what next for Disney in terms of growth opportunities. Strategically, where we position, we have core businesses in theme parks and hotels and cruises and timeshare and adventure travel, Adventures by Disney now with National Geographic. There's some travel with there as well. Consumer products, and we try to look for growth opportunities, whether it be buying another company related to what we do, or getting into new lines of business and trying to figure out really how do we grow, which is not easy because it's a $26 billion revenue segment, and so moving the needle on something like that is tough, especially in the sort of the travel and leisure world. I mean, how is the pandemic? The other side of what I do is to try to figure out. We work with the various lines of businesses. So the people that run Walt Disney World in Florida, which is in and of itself a massive business, 70,000 employees, cast members. It's a very complex ecosystem of different businesses. I mean, there's theme parks, there's hotels, there's retail, there's food and beverage, there's consumer products, there's a whole transportation infrastructure. You're essentially running a city. So it's tremendously complex. So I'll work with the folks who, we'll work with the folks who run that business to try to help them figure out how to improve how they run and become more profitable. We'll work with Disneyland in California, Paris, or Asia businesses. We'll work with the cruise business folks We'll work with the timeshare folks or consumer products. So the second part of my job is to work with the folks who run those businesses on whatever they're thinking about to try to help them improve their profitability or the value of their businesses. Your second question, how we've been affected. I mean, I don't, other than like the airline business, I can't think of too many businesses that have been more affected. I mean, we were, as you guys, I'm sure you read all about it, but perfectly positioned pre-pandemic. I mean, the portfolio of assets that we have at the Walt Disney Company is truly amazing. The quality of our intellectual property is great. It really does all work in this very symbiotic ecosystem where 1 and 1 does equal 3. And then on the flip side of that, a pandemic, which I will freely admit we didn't really plan for in any of our scenarios, just shut it all down. So, I mean, most of our businesses have been completely shut down. And the way it's impacted us, it's hard. Short term, how it's impacted us. It shut off the water spigot. So that's pretty clear. It shut it off. And there's a whole lot of considerations with what do you do now? How do you deal with the fact that your business has been shut off? And then in the short term, how do you even think about reopening? There's not just what does the government say? And that in and of itself is complex because there's the local government, there's the state government, and there's the federal government. And they're not necessarily coordinated. And each state, each area of the world where we operate in has different considerations and different ways of kind of handling it. But in addition to all of that complexity, we're kind of dealing with Disney. And our brand stands for, everybody feels like it's like it's almost like a public trust, right? Everybody feels like they own Disney and they have a right in sort of how we operate, and they need to feel safe. So we have another level of standard. Like we can't afford the brand dilution for anything to happen to any of our guests, which is hard because we're operating a high volume theme park business where it is predicated on a lot of people coming in, paying us money to experience attractions and parades and shows and nighttime spectaculars and hugging our characters and doing all the sort of fun things that everybody expects to do. So even in the short-term impact from the pandemic, figuring out what our new world looks like is very, very tough. We know we have to open, and we're going to be very, very cautious about how to do that. Shanghai, as you guys know, we opened that yesterday, and at a much lower capacity than what we would typically have. And so we're just sort of baby stepping this thing, and we'll sort of ease our way into it. The bigger challenge, I think, is going to be long-term. I mean, how does travel and leisure change as a market? How, a lot of people fly to get to our locations. So how's that going to get impacted? Just the sociological sort of effects on how people will vacation and will they go to places like this? Not dissimilar to like going to a concert or a sporting event. I mean, going to a theme park does present challenges. But if I had, obviously I'm not objective at all, but trying to be as objective as I can. If I had to place my money on any company that's going to be a good, to think really carefully about how to do this in the right way, I think Disney is going to be, exceptionally cautious and careful and make sure that our guests are safe and we'll do whatever we have to do. I think long term, we will get back to a normal place and, we will, people want to be happy. They want to enjoy, entertaining experiences. And I think we do a really good job at that. So I think long-term, it'll be fine. And we'll continue to do the things that we're doing, probably in a slightly different ways that are hard to anticipate at this point, frankly. But, from where we are today to where that new normal is and how long that takes is obviously, it's a difficult challenge.
Yeah, so you kind of touched on it towards the end of that answer, like the long-term solutions to the world as it's developing. Has Disney been exploring options such as like virtual theme parks or expanding their ways to connect with an audience, maybe less in person? In addition to obviously Disney Plus that I know people are viewing a lot right now, just how are you kind of looking towards the future in that aspect?
Clearly, I think when we look at something like that, it's got to be an experience which is not instead of. It's got to be in addition. The way I think about it, in addition to. It's how does that relationship work between a physical experience and a virtual experience? And at the end of the day, there's nothing like being there. Like, I mean, there's watching a sporting event, and then there's being at a sporting event. And if we did anything with a virtual sort of product, which I think could be really interesting for us, and we always are evaluating a number of different opportunities. I think it would have to be complementary and accretive, or sort of additive, so that we just give our guests and consumers in general an ability to engage in multiple ways, whether you're physically here or you're in your home. They're sort of complementary to each other, so that somebody doesn't decide, hey, I get it, I'm in Ohio and I just went on the It's a Small World ride in Anaheim, and I don't feel like I need to go there. I get it. We don't necessarily want that. We want much more engagement, so that doing something virtually in your home gives you the incentive or the desire to actually visit our physical experiences. And there's a lot of different ways we can do that, right? It's not just sort of from a commercial perspective, just from an experience perspective, just in terms of how it goes. I also think there's interesting things with just the social engagement of that. You could, if you're not necessarily planning on going to visit Shanghai, you could all go to the Tron ride, and you and your buddies could sort of go together to go on that Tron ride, or visit Paris, or visit Hong Kong, or visit California or Florida. So I think there's a lot of ways we could do that. But it's, we just sort of have to figure out how. And I also don't think that's something we would do just because of the pandemic. I think that's the way the world was evolving anyway. So for me, I think experiences that are not just sort of like arbitrage or trying to capitalize on this short-term 2-3 year window, or however long it is, and saying, hey, we got to come out with something. It's a knee-jerk reaction. We got to come out with something now because everybody's stuck at home. That's what I almost look at, like what museums are doing. When you can go take a tour of a museum, it's kind of like a knee-jerk reaction to, I can't go see the Mona Lisa or this thing in person, so I'm just going to give them something to do at home. I would say this is a long-term additional way to engage with our guests and our customers, and it's got to be that. It can't just, maybe it could be motivated, or the impetus could be the short-term dynamic that we're experiencing right now, but it's got to have long-term viability for us to invest. And it's got to be something where the guests are truly entertained. It's obviously going to be convenient because you don't have to go to a park. It's going to be more affordable because you don't have to pay to get in necessarily. But that's kind of how we would think about it. But certainly we are thinking about stuff like that. It's hard to pull off. It's a great idea in theory. Obviously, everybody, I'm not revealing anything, but I mean, everybody would think we should do something like that. It's just hard to go from the conceptual idea to actually pulling it off in a way that's truly engaging, and it's a viable commercial model versus just being some sort of marketing thing.
Yeah. So we have a question from the audience that kind of relates to the cheaper aspect of the virtual experience. And it's, how do you think that the depressed economy, where families simply don't have as much money to spend on non-necessities, will affect Disney and its choices?
I think in the short term, it's a real concern. I mean, in the short term, our product, I think, is very different than anything you get at other places. I mean, we invest a huge amount of money. Our IP is, really, really compelling. So I certainly think the price value is worth it, but there's no doubt that the current situation makes it tough for a lot of people who would otherwise go. I think that, it's a tough answer in the short term because our capacity is also going to be, the supply is also going to be suppressed a little bit because of social distancing. Less people are going to be allowed in the parks, especially in the short term. So if before we let in X number of people, now it's just going to be less because of, sort of the current situation, the dynamic. So we probably need less people in the short term, but in the long term, I mean, the economy needs to fully recover for us, just like anybody else. And we're hoping that that happens. I think there's some ways we need to think about, which we certainly haven't figured out, some ways we need to think about evolving our business model. Maybe there's ways of carving up, offering a new product. Maybe instead of a whole day, we can offer parts of a day or something. I mean, these are things that we've always sort of contemplated, and we haven't committed to doing any of it, but maybe there's ways of offering, different types of experiences which are more affordable, depending on sort of what you want to do. So it's not just one price for everybody. Maybe it's sort of tiering, and we'll certainly explore some stuff like that. At this point, it's tough. I mean, we're kind of focused on reopening. So we're fighting the ground war, and we're not able to focus so much on like, hey, what does the next 5 years look like? What are the next 10 years like? Partly because we just don't know. Like everybody else, we're feeling our way through the dark. And partly because we are just trying to figure out how to provide people with what they crave, which is they want to go back and have fun and, be happy in our parks and our cruise ships and our hotels and do all the stuff that they want to do.
Okay. So shifting gears a little bit, we have another question about what kind of lessons and experiences, as well as skills, did you gain throughout your time in smaller startups that have helped you switch your career to working for a larger corporation like Disney?
That's a great question. I think the ability to be, I guess, to really, when you work at a big company, especially at a younger age, I think you develop all these analytical tools to do various things, whether it's from an engineering perspective or from an operating perspective or from a financial perspective. You learn sort of tools, whether it's in business school or just even at the company. But I don't think you learn how to evolve that into making decisions. And when you have a small business, you constantly are faced with, all right, I can do the analysis, or I have to do the analysis. I have to add and subtract and figure out whether or not I think analytically something is worthwhile. But then when push comes to shove, I actually have to make a decision and do it. And I have to assess risk, not on paper, but in reality. It's like street fighting versus, sort of this just military grade where you're so far removed from it. And I feel like in a corporate lens, especially the bigger company you get, you're a little bit removed from it. Whereas when in a small business, you are right there in the thick of it. And you have to not only do the analysis, but you have to make the decision, and you got to feel the repercussions. And sometimes it hurts, and you have to react quickly, and you have to move on. So I think you get very good in a small business environment of, at least I did, of figuring out your downside and figuring out where the exit doors are before you walk into the room and how you might get screwed on something. And you're constantly thinking about that because you can't really afford to lose too much, right? And so I think that to me is the thing that I learned coming, when I came back to Disney. It's really the ability, different than I think what would have happened to me if I just stayed in corporate America. I feel like I can assess risk much better. And I know what risk is what risk is sort of acceptable versus what risk isn't. And I feel like I have a better sense of like how much work is required or analysis is truly required to make a decision. I think a lot of times in corporate America, I guess I'm speaking about, a limited data set because I haven't worked at 15 different Fortune 500 companies. There can be analysis paralysis. There's so much work done. And you get these decks that are 100, 200 slides long with fantastic analysis, but it wasn't necessary to necessarily do all of that. I think it's just like, I don't know what else to do, so I'm just going to keep analyzing and doing stuff, right? I'm going to keep looking at the market. I'm going to keep looking at supply and demand and what other people are charging and what should I charge. And at some point, you have to make a decision. So I think what you learn in a small business environment is how to go from the analytical aspect to actually just making a decision and doing something. And I think that's an important lesson in general, which is you have to have the tools to analyze something. You have to. That's just the basic entry fee to sort of doing something business related. But then I think you have to take it to the next level to think about like, what would I then do with this information? what decision would I actually make and why? And can I defend that decision? Is it a reasonable decision? And I think that's the stuff where you just get through experience. And you don't have that a lot in corporate America because you've sort of grown up shielded from the street to a certain extent because you haven't been on those front lines. And so I think that's the benefit of, I think, going the direction I went, which is something from something smaller, something bigger. The flip side, this wasn't the question that was asked, I guess, but I'll add on to it. The flip side is that it can get frustrating. It can get frustrating, right? When you go from something smaller to something bigger and you're like, okay, I'm ready to go, ready to take action. It's time for us to actually do something. But it's a big organization and there's a lot of different impacts in a lot of different areas. So it doesn't always necessarily move as fast as you'd like. That can be frustrating. And I have felt frustrated sometimes, like not where I see opportunities for us to go do things that we're not doing because of a variety of reasons, some of which may be great reasons, but sometimes that, can kind of work both ways. So I think from Disney's perspective, they're happy to have somebody like me who has that kind of unique lens and background. And certain times they're probably like, enough, like we got to hold back, we got to wait, so you sort of, over time you get good at knowing like when to go all in and when to kind of hold back, but it's a judgment call, I would say.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned the size of Disney and how that affects like the process of making decisions. So Lincoln in the chat asked, with Disney being such a large organization, what are the challenges with turning the ship to seize new opportunities?
It really comes down to what are our priorities and the will of the organization to go pursue any endeavor, right? So I'll give you the best example. I'll give you a really good example, Disney Plus. So we had massive risk, right, to cannibalize our existing way of making money off of selling content. And we recognized that method of monetization, that business model, was at risk. And at some point, it was just going to erode, and we had to do something. Within a relatively very short period of time, I mean, I'm talking like a couple of years, we built out, we bought a company called BAMTech, which enabled all the technology for the streaming technology. That was about, I think it was a billion, actually it was $1.6 billion for half of it. So it was over a $3 billion investment to buy the technology, which I think took a lot of guts to go do that. And then in addition to that, we built out the platform to provide all of our content through Disney Plus, and ultimately start removing content off of other services so we could have this direct-to-consumer relationship. That is a massive, massive transformation for a company like Disney, which for decades had monetized its core intellectual property and its content in a certain way. And so I think that's an example of where we saw the risk and the and the corresponding upside. We moved very quickly to alter it. And I think, I mean, listen, there's a little bit of luck to it too. We wound up buying Fox, obviously, which helps because we have a whole lot of new content to distribute now through Disney Plus and through Hulu. But obviously, pre-pandemic and rolling this out, in November of last year was a very lucky thing. We couldn't have predicted that it was going to happen this way, but obviously there's been some benefit from that because people are at home. But I would say that's an example of a large corporation moving extremely quickly to reinvent the major part of its business to give consumers what they want when they want it, and in a way that really de-risks our company. So I thought that was just extremely impressive. And you don't see a lot of companies doing that because they just don't want to cannibalize themselves, and they're just not willing to do it. And there's a lot of examples of that. But I think Disney, we ultimately did do that. And there's examples on the other side where we probably haven't, in my opinion, acted quickly enough. But that was, I would say, a great example of where we did.
Yeah, so you've kind of talked about ways that Disney is poised to make it through this crisis through the stories that you've told. And we have a question from Facebook from Dennis that is, what were some of the key characteristics that put Disney in such a good place to manage the crisis? And if, like, what other companies could be doing to get themselves through it the same way that Disney will?
Oh God, it's hard. That second part's hard. Of what have we done that other companies could learn from? I mean, I think part of what we benefit from is just the psychological, like the cast members who work at Disney, most of them really just feel like they sort of drank the Kool-Aid, right? They feel they love the brand, they love what we do, and they feel like they have this obligation to our guests to provide the service. So they're very loyal, and they're going to just sort of stay in there and do whatever we possibly have to do to reopen. So I think, having a workforce or having, employees who are so engaged and have a love for what they do in the brand certainly helps, right? Because at a time like this, you do need that kind of loyalty. We have liquidity. I mean, from a liquidity standpoint, we're financially very strong. That's from, I think, years of just having a successful business model where we've built up trust with the equity and the credit markets, that they're a company that we can trust, that they can trust. So I think we have ample liquidity to sort of get it through. Not every company, I think, has that ability to raise capital in the public markets to be able to do stuff like that. We have a collection of businesses that, certainly Disney Plus helps. People are still really engaging with our brand, not just through Disney Plus, but through various sort of social platforms. People are still engaging with us. I think having a strong brand really helps. What else? I would say those are the main things. Having loyal, sort of employees that are really in it for the long term, having a strong balance sheet, and then just having the strength of our brand and the ability of or the desire for consumers, not just domestically, but all over the world, the desire to engage with our characters and our brand and our stories, and the association that our brand has with happiness, and that as a fundamental human trait, I think helps us sort of get through all this stuff, because people want us to exist on the other side.
Yeah. So a question that I think is on a lot of people's minds right now is, what advice would you share with people graduating from undergrad or MBA programs kind of right now as we enter the workforce in these uncertain times?
What advice I have on entering the workforce? You mean in terms of, I guess, in terms of finding a job, or in terms of performance once you have a job, or what are you?
Judging by the question, I would say performance upon getting the job.
Yeah. It's not, so I guess if it's just, if it's that, I don't know if it's pandemic related. So if it's not about actually getting a job, if it's more about once you're in that job, I don't know that my answer would change because we're in a pandemic. I think it's sort of the fundamentals of, you should view any position you have as like every day is day one, is kind of the way I always try to look at it, which is you have to earn your right to be there every day, right? Nobody has the obligation to pay you, right? You have the obligation to perform the very best that you can do every day. And I think if you go into work, with that attitude and that mindset of how can I help, how can I sort of put forth my best effort every day, you're going to become very, very valuable to wherever you work. But you really have to have that mindset that every day is day one. That's not just at work. That's with sort of any relationship. So you don't sort of take it for granted. I think that's probably a very important thing. And develop, really, your name is the biggest asset that you're going to have. And I think your name is your brand, and you have to associate that with things that you want to be associated with. If you want to be associated with high quality work, accuracy, especially when you're younger and you're sort of judged on sort of the accuracy of your analysis or of your work, then be accurate, right? Make sure your brand is always sort of way up there and your name is way up there. When people think of you, they think of you as a hard worker, somebody who's thorough, somebody who really cares about what they do, somebody that they can trust and rely on, not just ethically and morally, but somebody who really cares about the quality of their work, because it's so difficult to build that up and it's so easy to lose it. And I think that when you're younger and you're coming out of school, you kind of maybe have more of an attitude like, if I fall this time, I'll just get something else. It's fine, right? It's not that big of a deal. I'm not that into this. I'll just get something else. It's fine. I think it's a fallacy to think that way, though, because number one, you establish that sort of pattern of decision-making and thinking for the rest of your career. You're sort of developing bad habits by even allowing yourself to think that way, even if you're in something. You're also just diluting the value of your name. And that's what I see when we see young people coming in. It's like, especially at Disney, we're so particular about who we hire. We don't hire that many people, especially for the type of work that I do. We're very, very selective. And it's like, you got in. Now, make sure that you're doing all the blocking and tackling, all the basics, so that you're always associated with, doing great quality work. And that to me leads to new opportunities, bigger and better things, the ability to try new things, whether it's at another business or, within the company that you're working at, but just focus on the fundamentals. And so I don't think that's necessarily particular to the pandemic, but maybe even more so because it's going to be harder to find things now than it would have been obviously before. So it's a long haul. Don't expect to things to happen quickly, and just kind of try to have a short-term mindset, like today is the day I'm going to do a really good job, and just that's what you should focus on, just every day trying to do a really good job and trying to help out, and really just appreciate the opportunity and the value, and don't focus so much on like, what's my life going to look like in 5 years. Just focus on doing a good job today. Put your head down, and I would say those are the things I would that's my advice.
So you kind of touched on your personal brand and how like each person has their own personal brand. So I think kind of relating to that, John asked if you could change one aspect of your career trajectory, i.e. have taken a different opportunity sometime along the way, what would it be and why?
I don't know that I would do anything different. I know that's probably not the answer you want to hear. Even like, that's not, by the way, stuff didn't always work out for me. Like, when I started that company, it failed. It didn't work out. And, that was awful. That was a terrible, terrible experience. I mean, there's times when I owned, the aviation business and the countertop manufacturing business. I mean, more days than not were tough. I mean, it was a grind. I mean, it's just like, you got to do all of that stuff by yourself, everything. It's truly street fighting every day. It's very, very difficult. I wouldn't change it though. It's just, it becomes part of who you are. It builds up the calluses. It enables you to sort of fight and persevere and to do all those things. So there are times where you're going through and you're like, is it worth it? Do I, man, I wish I wouldn't have done this, but like you did. I think the thing that you got to do is to figure out, is the way in which I'm making decisions a good way? Am I making decisions based on my strengths and weaknesses and who I am? Or am I making decisions based on who I'd like to be and who I perceive myself to be and based on what other people are doing? I think so. I wouldn't change anything because it's all led to who I am. I think the art is in taking everything that you've done and trying to figure out a pattern of like how you got here and what things worked and what things didn't, so that when you are in day one today and you're making decisions about the future, you're going to make a better decision today than you would have 10 years ago or 20 years ago, because you're learning. It's like AI, right? I mean, AI is constantly learning and they're getting better. I mean, you have AI, and to a certain extent, are you getting better at what you're doing? I guess it's not artificial intelligence; it's real intelligence. So it's are you getting better at how you make decisions, or are you getting worse? So it's not so much like what would I change. I look at it like how would I make a better decision today, knowing what I know about my past. So I don't think I would change anything. I think I would just. It's not to say, by the way, that things worked out, because they did not always work out. But I think my failures in the past make me a better business person today. There is no doubt about that. There's no doubt about that. So I wouldn't trade those failures, although very painful to go through sometimes.
All right, so I think we only have time for maybe one more question. So I was wondering if there are any books that you would recommend that have like changed your life or shaped the way you think about things that you would recommend to someone who's just starting out in their careers.
Boy, any books I would recommend? I'm a big, well, now I have little kids, so the reality is I don't read anymore. I used to read a ton of biographies, so I love history, and so I read a huge amount of biographies. Um, what books would I recommend? I guess a recent one that I read, which I thought was really kind of thought-provoking, was 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. I'm blanking on his name. He wrote *Sapiens*, which is, I thought was a really interesting book. I like books about like Jugad, what was it called? Jugad, I can email Michael, Jugad Innovation. I like books about innovation. There's a book I think called Jugad Innovation. I'm looking at my library to see what else I have here. Yeah, Jugad Innovation. Actually, let me get it. This was a good one.
Okay.
This is a really good book. And it just talks about how to do things with little money and think frugally. And it talks a lot about emerging markets and how creative they are in coming up with ideas with little or no money or nothing. And I think it's an interesting thing, especially for you guys, where you might be in a situation where you're considering doing something more entrepreneurial because it's just kind of hard to get a job anyway. I think learning these lessons of how to make your own lemonade is great. So that book I think is great in just terms of like how to make your own lemonade and how to, there's so many examples of how people did it with nothing. Like when you say to yourself, when you look at yourself, you're like, God, I have no money, I have debt from school, there's no possible way I can do anything. Like you read these stories and they had like you're obscenely wealthy compared to what a lot of these people have. So I think it's a sort of inspirational way to sort of think frugally, just how to be, nimble and flexible in terms of building something. So I think that's probably an interesting one to look at.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I've really appreciated getting the chance to speak with you. So now I'm going to throw it back to Michael and let him kind of wrap everything up. But thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I thought for sure Alex was going to ask you what your favorite movie or TV show was.
You already said The Last Dance.
That is true. That's true.
That's one of my top favorite documentaries. My favorite TV show, I love The Wire. I thought The Wire was great. My favorite movie, I thought, I suppose I got to say something Disney, don't I?
Well, I don't know.
All of the Marvel movies? Well, let's just say that.
Phew.
Yeah.
You never know who's watching. Well, this is great. It was funny. Doug DiGirolamo is one of my colleagues. We were talking about, what was happening in the pandemic and Disney, and obviously we're all reading the same articles. And Doug was saying, wouldn't it be great to get from Disney? I'm like, I've got someone. And I think the journey, under this sort of topic of entrepreneurial speaker series, it's entrepreneurship's a broad topic and category. And I think your own journey, because obviously you were at Disney right before we met, and then all the things that you did along the way, and now being back in the seat that you're in. And so it's fascinating. I mean, I really appreciate you sharing with our students and community, and this has been a really nice forum. And I did tell your brother that I was sharing about this event. I was threatening to get him on as well. So,
wow, you're digging into the bottom of the pile.
Exactly. I have to remember which Stotland I started with, but yes, Doug and I, when I was an intern at Microsoft, Doug was very nice to me there. So, back in the day. So,
yeah, he's a lot less engaging than I am.
Totally.
Yeah.
Hope he's watching. Well, good. Well, Jeff, thank you for doing this. Just briefly for our participants, we have 2 more sessions this week. So tomorrow at 1 p.m., we're going to have Hallie Kogelschatz, who runs a company called Shark and Minnow that does some really interesting production and media work and has worked in some of our online classes. So that'll be at 1 o'clock tomorrow. And then on Thursday at 1 o'clock, we're going to have Aditi Shah, who's an alum of the university, who's working in Honda's innovations group. So, and by the way, for anybody who's watching, feel free to suggest others. We've got 3 next week, so we're going to keep this going, even though the semester is coming to a close. We're going to keep doing these, maybe not at the same pace, but we'll have at least 1 or 2 of these a week. So, Jeff, thank you again for doing this. It's great to see you. Best to your family, and good luck with everything. And thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye, Michael.
See you soon, Jeff. Take care.